Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming by. If you're new here, I am Sherrilyn, and I am so glad you found me. If you're not new here and you expected to see me last week, I expected to also not see me last week, see you last week. You know what? I'm just gonna stop talking about like my upload schedule and how like ahead of everything I am, because even if I'm ahead, just something comes and just knocks me down. And last week it was pink eye. Me and one of my daughters got it, and although I like was mentally like, yeah, let's go, I've got stuff to do, physically it probably was the best that I just stayed hidden. Okay. So anyways, I missed you, and that's where I was. So apologies that I didn't upload last week. I won't keep you guys waiting anymore. We are going to get right into it. Before we do though, I have one quick message for you. Thank you to our sponsor today, Beam. If you have been here for a minute, you know how much I love their Dream Powder. If you are new to the channel though, I'm going to quickly fill you in. Their Dream Powder is basically a cup of nightly cocoa heaven. That's how I explain it. That's how I feel about it. But the best part about it is that it is a healthy cup of hot cocoa heaven. Dream is packed with all of the best ingredients so that you can have the best night's sleep. And with a good night's sleep, there are so many benefits. Some of the benefits from a good night's sleep are increased focus, boosted energy, improved mood, better skin, reduced stress, supported immune system. I truly feel like I benefit from all of those, especially boosted energy in the morning. I am not a morning person. Big Eye absolutely is a morning person. So when I notice that I've had a really good night's sleep and I'm not feeling groggy from something the night before, I'm just like a whole new gal ready to take on the world. Dream delivers this through an array of flavors and formulas. If you are in the US, you have the added option of being able to have the powder with CBD. I've said this so many times. Another reason why I would just love to move to the States, among many right now with Canada. We're not really going to get into that though, but I get such a huge benefit from the non-CBD version. So even if you are in the US, don't feel pressured to get the CBD version just because I'm saying that I would really like to try it. The non-CBD version is incredible. I cannot say enough things about it. In fact, I am always pushing my family and my friends to try it. So I'm always very generous with my powder. And then I regret it when I'm at the end of my powder before my subscription comes in for the next month, which is what happened to us recently. So we had to wait for like 2 weeks. And when it came, it was like Christmas. I even ended up recording Brent's reaction because we were like so excited. He just is so cute sitting with his little Beam, all stoked to just get cozy and watch, like, we try to watch a full show, but realistically it's like 15 minutes of a show and then we fall asleep and then finish it the next day. Another thing people cannot believe when I talk to them about the Dream drink is that it is only 15 calories. There's no added sugar. It is dairy-free, gluten-free, vegan, non-GMO, and keto-friendly. And don't just take my word for it. I obviously am somebody who has greatly benefited from having Dream and thoroughly enjoy it, but 93% of the participants reported that Dream helped them get a better night's sleep and they woke up feeling more refreshed as well. So I'm not the only one. If you want to try it out, click the link in my description and use code Sherrilyn to get up to 35% off. Do not miss out on this limited time offer. Start your new year feeling the best that you can. Get a good night's sleep. Shop my exclusive discount with Beam and get up to 35% off this limited time offer with your code Sherrilyn. All right, today's case is one of those where you're like, there is no way that this can be real, just due to the fact that there's conspiracies and like intertwining murders and powerful families in a small town aspect. But now that we know that it's true, after 8 years of the Ballard family patiently waiting for just like a sliver of justice, things are looking like there are finally going to be answers after there were 3 arrests recently made in the Crystal Rogers case. Crystal was 35 years old and a mother of 5 when she just disappeared overnight from her home in Bardstown, Kentucky in 2015. Bardstown is described as a very cute little town and somewhere that you wouldn't expect just passing by, that the locals have been haunted by a string of unsolved murders and a notorious disappearance. Like, Crystal's. Crystal Maria Rogers was born to Sherry and Tommy Ballard. She was the oldest of 3 kids, 2 girls and 1 boy, and she grew up very close to her parents, but she knew that specifically when it came to her dad, she had him wrapped around her little finger. She's described as somebody who was friendly and made friends very easily, but was pretty shy and down to earth. She didn't like to, put herself out there too much or be the center of attention. But once you got to know her, she made time for her friends and was somebody that people really enjoyed being around. Crystal had kids really young, but she owned the job of being a mom. She ended up having 5 children, 3 girls and 2 boys. And there were times that she was working 2 jobs just so that she could provide the very best for them in life. I came across some memories that were written about Crystal from a friend of hers and from her daughter, and I wanted to read those and just share with you something that describes Crystal coming from those who knew her best. There's so much I could say about Crystal. She was fun, caring, happy, humble, beautiful. I could go on and on. She was the best friend anyone could ever have. Anytime I needed her, she would drop everything. It did not matter. There was a time we were joined at the hip. Where one of us was, you'd always find the other. As we got older and had families of our own, we didn't get to spend much time together, but always picked up right where we left off. She was a great mom, one of the best. Her kids were always her priority no matter what. And she always treated my girls like they were her own as well. She would always be willing to help someone. She would give you the shirt off her back if needed and never asked for anything in return. She was blunt and not scared to tell how it was. Sometimes I did not like it, but it was what I needed to hear. She always had my best interest at heart. She meant the world to me and always will. I will always cherish what we had in our friendship. I'm a better person for having her in my life. There will never be another Crystal, as she was one of a kind. And that was written from her friend Beth. My mom is a very special woman. The memory that will forever be in my heart is going to DQ and buying my mama lunch. We would always get the chicken strip basket with the toast and gravy to go with it. Going to Mama Martin's and playing Phase 10 and Aggravation over and over while eating snacks. Since my mom's been missing, life has been really hard. I always wonder what my life would be like if she and my papa were still here. That was written by Crystal's daughter Kylie, and it was Kylie who on June 5th, 2015 had texted her grandmother Sherry to ask if she had spoken to Crystal because she hadn't been able to get a hold of her mom for 2 days while she and her siblings were at their dad's house. Sherry hadn't, but it was a busy weekend. It was the 4th of July weekend. So she had just sent off a text to Crystal saying, when you get this, Kylie is looking for you. She sent a message to me, so get in touch with her. She goes about her business, and then later in the evening, she gets another text from Kylie asking about an update. Like, had she heard from her since? And at this point, she's like, what? Like, she still hasn't been in touch? So Sherry calls around to friends and family and asks if anybody else had spoken to Crystal, and she realizes that no one had. It's been 2 days at this point, and immediate panic sets in. Sherry drives to Crystal's house to see what's going on, and when she gets there, she sees Crystal's common-law husband, Brooks, in his car in the driveway, and she rolls down her window, asks where Crystal is, and he says, I don't know. It's at this point that she notices that their young child is in the back seat. So Crystal had 4 children in a previous relationship, and her and Brooks had a child together that was just over a year old. And Sherry found this quite strange that Brooks was alone with the baby because he didn't typically care for the little guy on his own. Crystal was always there. Like we've established, she was just a really hands-on mom. So that alarmed Sherry right away. She knew that something was wrong. She heads over to file a missing persons report at the police station on July 5th. And later that evening, as word is spreading amongst immediate family and friends looking for Crystal, a close family friend calls and says that he was almost positive that he saw Crystal's car on the side of Bluegrass Parkway. When Sherry's family hears about this, it's Sherry's father and her brother that drive to Bluegrass Parkway to see if it's her car, and sure enough, at mile marker 14, Crystal's 2007 Chevrolet Impala was found parked off the side of the road, and it had a flat tire. Her keys were still in the ignition and her purse and cell phone were also inside, but there was no sign of Crystal. It literally just looked like she had pulled off to the side of the road, got out of her vehicle, and then vanished. Now, something that immediately caught the attention of Crystal's father and brother was that the tire, it was noticeably flat, but it wasn't like fully deflated. And knowing Crystal best, they knew that she would have continued driving on it until she had gotten off of Bluegrass Parkway at the very least and was like in a more public, safer area. And they know this because this had actually happened to her before. She had damaged one of her rims because her tire had gone flat, and she just continued to drive on it until she was in a public area, so the rims were shot. So this was the first indication to her family that she did not drive the vehicle to the spot that it was, and that she had disappeared prior to her vehicle being left on the side of the road. Another thing that stood out to them about the vehicle was that the back part of her seat was pushed forward, and then the bottom, seat tushy part was pulled back pretty far. First of all, they thought that it was too far back for Crystal to have been the driver, but second, she was somebody who drove around with the butt part closer to the steering wheel, and this back part almost like completely flat. So that setup in itself is unique to Crystal. That's how she was comfortable driving. So they know this about her. And on top of everything else, they're like, this isn't sitting right. And also, if it was her that would have gotten out of that vehicle because she had a flat tire, nervous about safety, why would she have left her purse and her phone if she was going to go and walk for help? When the police got involved in the investigation, they and still are very tight-lipped in their findings. They say that they have theories and evidence, but are working to ensure that their case is ironclad. And so from that first day that her vehicle was found, Crystal's father, Tommy, is heavily involved in the investigation and the search for Crystal. He organized and ran search parties every single day for over 6 months and had vowed to never give up until he found his daughter. Now, for an investigator to hold their cards really close, this is not uncommon, especially with really complex cases, which we are going to realize shortly. It goes so much deeper than just Crystal's disappearance. On top of Crystal's disappearance, this town is also dealing with 4 other murders, one of them being Crystal's father, Tommy. At the time of Crystal's disappearance, she was living with her boyfriend, Brooks Hauk, and their almost 2-year-old son, as well as Crystal's 4 other children. Brooks admits that he is probably the last person known to have seen Crystal. He said the last time he saw her, she was on her phone playing games at their house when he went to bed, and she was still on the couch, and that was the last time he saw her. Earlier in that day, the last people besides Brooks that had seen her were her neighbors, and that was at around 5 p.m. They saw Crystal coming in from a Walmart trip with her children, unpacking bags. And then there's hours and hours into the rest of that evening that the only person that had seen Crystal was Brooks. Now, Brooks and Crystal had met when she had separated from her husband and she rented a home from Brooks. The Hauks family is quite well known in their area, and they're known for having properties and being landlords. He even ran to be the sheriff in Nelson County. So they're like a big deal, okay? And not long after renting from Brooks, Crystal tells her family that the 2 of them are going to go on a date. This was something her family supported, obviously due to who he was, who his family was. They were excited for Crystal, and even made an effort that when they were introduced to him, Crystal's family were nervous about making a good impression on him for Crystal because they thought this would be a great match. It seemed to have started out good based on accounts from those who knew them. They had a 2-year-old son together, but when their child was born, it was obvious that there was a big disconnect between Brooks and crystals for other children. Hearing about this, like, just completely enraged me. I had a similar situation growing up, and Crystal's mother explained it as there was such a divide in his mind. Like, those children really, like, had no association with him at all. Like, okay, clearly this is a little bit triggering for me. But it was to the point where when they went grocery shopping, Brooks would pay for the three of them, meaning himself, Crystal, and their son, and then make her pay separately for her children. And I'm just like, if you are sharing a life with somebody, if you know that this is a single mother, these are her prior children, you love her, you're taking on those kids as your own. And just like I said, coming from somebody who had a terrible male figure in my life for many, many, many years, and it was very similar to this, like, it enrages me to hear about that. And I can relate to how Crystal's kids must have felt. I could probably have had like a little bit of leniency if he wasn't well off, he struggled to make ends meet, but this is not the case. Like, the Houck family are millionaires who own construction companies and had, I believe, over 70 rental properties. Like, they're doing okay to be able to afford to feed Crystal's children. Now, like I said, Brooks explained that Friday evening was the last time that he had seen Crystal when he woke up and realized that she had obviously not come to bed after playing games on her phone because she was gone when he woke up. Yet it was Crystal's daughter who had messaged her grandma Sherry to give any indication that there was something wrong and that Crystal hadn't been heard from. Sherry said from that moment of her pulling up and asking Brooks where Crystal was or if he had heard from her, and just his demeanor of being very nonchalant, something didn't fit right. And people react differently to so many situations, but it was the actions moving forward as well that didn't sit right with the family, especially if this is somebody that you love, you have a child with, they're missing. You would assume that you are going to be involved in finding this person that you love, that you're sharing a life with. But her version of that interaction was like very standoffish. She said, "Have you seen Crystal?" He's like, "Nope." And when she said, "Okay, well, I think I'm going to go file a missing persons report," he was like, "Yeah, that's a good idea. You should do that." Didn't offer to go and provide any of his information, being the last person to have seen her, and not once helped the family with the search for Crystal. Now, he did speak to Nancy Grace, though, and he told Nancy that the reason he had never reported her missing was because he wasn't alarmed when he woke up that morning and didn't see her. He said anytime, there had been a disagreement with them or things had been stressful, she had gone to her cousin, who's named Sabrina's house, to spend the night. Now, there's a couple things with this interview with Nancy Grace that tossed up some red flags for the family. One of them being when Sabrina heard this, she was like, absolutely not. Yes, they were extremely close, and Crystal would rely on her if she was stressed out about something. But she said that Crystal only went to her house during 2 arguments in 3 years of Crystal and Brooks being together, and one of the times she only stayed for 1 hour, and then the next time she was really trying to stick it to him, and she stayed for 2 hours. One of the main reasons Sabrina said Crystal would always give in and go back home is because of her kids. She missed them and she would never leave them. The second thing that stood out about this is that Brooks claimed that there was no issue. So there was never an argument or a fight for her to have gone to Sabrina's to decompress in the first place. 5 days after Crystal's disappearance on July 8th, Brooks voluntarily went into Nelson County Sheriff's Office for questioning. He gives a much more detailed account of their evening together. Brooks says that evening they went to his parents' farm around 7 p.m. and this farm is located about 10 to 15 miles away from their home. And there on the farm, he said that they fed cows, they had a fire with a big burn pile. When he was asked if he knew what was in this burn pile, he said no, and that it wasn't uncommon because there was always just piles of stuff laying around to burn, and most of the time he wouldn't know what it was. And after that, he said that him, Crystal, and their son just walked around the farm for a stroll. He remembered that it was pretty late at night, so that it was dark, and the detective knew that it was also raining that evening. So there were some concerns. But he goes on to say that they left, and when they got home, it was around midnight. Brooks goes on to say that they wrapped up their evening at midnight at the farm and then drove home, so that would probably get them home around 20 after 12. And he said he went to bed immediately and Crystal stayed up playing games on her phone. He reiterates what he says to Nancy Grace, that he woke up, she wasn't there, he wasn't concerned because he thought maybe she was at Sabrina's. Again, remember, like, he states that there was never an issue and that she never went there to spend the evening unless there was an argument. Again, like, that just doesn't even make sense too, because we know Sabrina's story and like she stayed for 2 hours max one time. But that's the story that he's sticking with. And so he assumed that she was with Sabrina, and he decides to go back to his family farm with his son because he said that there was a family function going on. It was interesting to watch his interrogation because, you know, if you watch a lot of my videos, you know I love dissecting interrogations, and he got emotional in it, but it was only at the point where he was talking about himself and all of the things that he has to do for work and thinking about all of the things that he needs to sell for auction because he's just not going to be able to deal with it anymore, and he's going to need to be there for their son like Crystal was, kind of like step into like her role and how active and involved she was in their life and all of the things that, you know, are going to sacrifice on his end so that he can do that for their son. Mid-interview, Nick Houck, who is Brooks's brother, who is also a Bardstown police officer, calls Brooks and tells him not to speak with police. Now, we're going to take a quick pause in the story so that you can listen to the interview, because, like, if this isn't the most cringe staged conversation, I don't know. Like, I've seen elementary plays with more talent than what we're about to watch.
Can I get this?
Sure.
Hello? No. I'm up here. I know that you didn't know. I'm up here in this interview with the Detective Snow. I've been up here a good little while. I'm filling out this statement here and everything. Are you telling me that's what I need to do? I know that. But the way that I look at it is, I'm innocent. I ain't done nothing wrong. What, you know? I know you told me innocent people have got jammed up, but if you're telling me to leave, I'll get up and leave. If you want me to. I know I'm going through a lot, but I'm trying to get this guy to help me. I don't think she's ran off with some other guy. I don't believe that. You can't make me think that. No. Yeah, so do I. I'll do exactly what you're telling me to do right now. Do you want me to get up and leave? Man, I don't think these people have got vindictive just to skin me for no reason. Man, this is not their family. This is not. All right, thank you. He thinks y'all are gonna fuck is what he thinks.
I don't know who he is.
Nick, my brother.
Now, at this point of this call, like, I do not know what the purpose of this call was, because to investigators, they are not even like thinking of Nick. They're wanting to get all the information they can from Brooks to find Crystal. And then this call comes through from him, and the investigator's like, what? Like, your brother, who is an officer, just told you to not talk with us about finding a woman who is missing. So the next day, Nick is called to come in and have a chat with a detective. I believe this was Detective John Snow. Like that was his name for real. Is his name. So when he gets this call, he says, I don't really have any information. I know that Brooks has been cooperative, so I don't need to add anything. First of all, he technically, if you want to say, was being cooperative. That's okay. But then you called to tell him not to cooperate. And the other thing you have to keep in mind is you are a police officer, and now you're, pretty much sister-in-law. Your brother's common law wife is missing. Would you not want to use those resources that you have to do everything that you can to help find her? When the Kentucky State Police found out about Nick interfering with the investigation of finding Crystal, people were pissed. I really did like to see how I feel like oftentimes smaller towns can get really bad reps for, hiding things and concealing stuff. We've gone through a lot of those types of cases. And while I can understand a lot of people's frustrations in Crystal's case, the way that Nick was handled immediately, I respected. He was basically told, like, how dare you not cooperate? You, should have never told Brooks to get off that call. And now that a detective is wanting to speak with you in this case, like, you have no choice but to do that. That's an order. So on July 15th, he was interviewed. And basically the reason he gives the detectives as to why he told his brother to leave was because he thought that they would ask him similar questions over and over again to try to trip him up. With Nick coming on to the radar with not being cooperative, before they brought him in to talk to him, investigators had, done a little digging, seeing his and Brooks's actions. And they find out that later that evening that Brooks had done that interview, the two of them had gone back to the family farm together. When he's confronted with this information that they were seen driving on camera, when he tried to say, like, oh, I don't remember when I was there, he again doesn't give an answer. He just says, I'll take your word for it. I guess I was there. I can't remember what I was doing because I was like a week ago, which, let's point out, is clearly selective memory, because you admitted that you were able to remember what you said on the call to Brooks and what you were thinking as to why you called him, but now your memory is lapsing from that same day. My take on Nick's interview is, definitely a guard, arrogant is actually probably the best word that I would describe his demeanor. He was adamant throughout the whole interview, though, that he had nothing to do with Crystal's disappearance, and that he even said, like, strap me up to a lie detector test because I will pass with flying colors. So he did take a lie detector test on July 20th, and he failed. Allegedly, he failed when he was asked specifically if he knew where Crystal was. And when he's told this by the interviewer, he just pops the F off. He's like, IDGAF, don't give a what your computer says. Like, I know the truth. I didn't do anything. I don't know where she is. And then he even takes it a step further and says, I also know that, like, my brother had nothing to do with this either.
Because you're telling me I'm lying and I know I'm not. I know the truth, And I'm going 100% honest with you, the grand jury, and everybody else I've spoken with.
Here's what I'm getting. We just said.
Yes, I have.
No, you haven't.
I most definitely have. And if you don't want to believe it, that's your issue. It's not mine.
It's not just me. I showed you.
Dude, I don't give a what your computer said. I'm just telling you, I didn't do it. I don't know nothing about it.
You did.
I don't know anything about it. My brother, and I can tell you, I know him well enough, he didn't do it.
Brooks did also take a lie detector test around this time, and it came back inconclusive, but allegedly did not show deception. So at this point, several months go by. It's October 16th, 2015, and the sheriff holds a press conference where he basically states that it's his belief that Crystal's case is no longer a missing persons case, and that he believes that Crystal is no longer alive, and he publicly names Brooks as a suspect. The same day that Brooks is named a suspect, his brother Nick is also fired from the Bardstown Police Department for interfering with investigation. Behind the scenes, a lot of tips were coming in, not only just to the police department, but also to Crystal's family. And there was one witness that came forward that said when he had heard about her leaving in her car at midnight, he contacted the police to say, oh, no, siree, that is not how this went down, in his opinion, because he distinctly remembered seeing a car between 10:30 p.m. and 11 p.m. the night prior when he was leaving work. At the time that he drove by, it was too dark out to know the color of the car, but early the next morning when he took the same route to go back to work, he saw the same car in the same spot, and he 10,000% was confident that it was the same car that was there the evening before when he was leaving work, and now sees that it was a red Impala. And this is important because if Brooks says that he and Crystal were at the farm from 7:30 until the two of them arrived home together in his truck just after midnight, how could her vehicle be there in the spot that it was found on that highway at 10:30 and still there the following morning when this eyewitness went back to work? This witness also mentioned another vehicle being at the scene that evening. This car stood out more to him in the dark because it was white, so it was easier to see. And he said about a mile up the road, pulled off the road on an angle kind of towards the ditch, he identified an older Buick or Caprice type car, and he knew that it was there the evening he saw what he believes was Crystal's car. But the next morning when he saw Crystal's car still there, that white car was not there. There was another tip that had come through about this white Buick, and this came through to Crystal's family because, like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, her family's been heavily involved in the search to find her. And they were told that there was a hunter that was hunting close to the Hauk farm that saw a white Buick pull into the property close to midnight, which would have been that evening that Crystal disappeared, and around the time that Brooks is saying that him and Crystal were still out there. So when her family found out about this white Buick, they went to Facebook and asked anybody in their friends list if they had any connections of knowing who this white vehicle belonged to. And someone did contact them and let them know that Brooks's grandmother, 82-year-old Anna Whitestead, owned a white Buick. By the time this information gets to the detectives and they were able to get a search warrant, the car had suddenly been sold. Now, she cooperated in terms of telling the detectives which dealership she sold it to. They were able to locate it, process it, but were not able to come up with any evidence. Something about that, though, I do want to mention is I watched the documentary on the disappearance of Crystal Rogers, and in that documentary, there is a scene where there is a forensic specialist who explains the dynamic in a lot of these types of small town investigations, and that the resources are very limited. Not only resources, but also the experience is very limited. So I believe he said that there was only like 10 pieces of evidence that they usually allow for doing like processing in an investigation. So if they're looking at a car, like they're not going to rip out the whole thing and go through hundreds of hair samples and fingerprint swabs. They're very limited to what they are going to pick and choose. So while that may seem like, okay, yeah, they processed it and didn't come up with anything, we know that when Crystal's car was processed, there, I think, was around only 10 things that were taken into evidence. We also have to remember the fact that this vehicle was retrieved from a dealership after it was sold. And at this point now, this evidence is extremely compromised because now it's touched other hands, one. And two, generally, dealerships completely detail like the crap out of a used vehicle that comes in because they're going to want to make it look, as shiny and brand spanking new as possible to be able to resell it. Brooks grandmother was subpoenaed to testify in front of a grand jury about her vehicle and its potential involvement in disposing of a body, which were the words that were used in this subpoena. And she refused to testify, and her lawyer said that the statement that she had already provided to the police and the fact that she was cooperative in terms of telling them where the vehicle could be found was sufficient, and that she didn't need to help any further. After that argument, the judge later ruled that all future proceedings that involved her were to be kept confidential, so we don't know what would have been said. Now, regardless of roadblocks, the Ballard family remained very vocal, especially about their suspicion about Brooks. I can't imagine how frustrating it would have been to hear that he had officially been named a suspect in Crystal's disappearance, and you're hoping for things to move very fast when that formal acknowledgement is put out publicly, and it just didn't happen. So they were the ones who were constantly reminding everybody, like, don't forget Crystal. She is still missing. We need to find her, and we need to hold those who we believe responsible. Like I said at the beginning of this, one of the loudest people that was championing for Crystal's discovery was her father, Tommy. He was out day and night looking for his daughter, and his family said that when he wasn't physically outside looking, he was actively involved in the investigation in their home. He was scouring online, going through mountains of tips, just trying to put pieces together. In the fall of 2016, so over a year after Crystal's disappearance, Tommy is still on the ground. He's being vocal that he is feeling like he's making progress. He's still being interviewed and talking on the news. One thing that I noticed that often when he was out there, he's wearing neon clothes, neon vests. Like, he is not hiding the fact that there's nothing that is going to stop him from giving up. Then on November 19th, 2016, he made plans to go hunting on land that he and his family had owned for around 12 years. He went with his son, Casey, Crystal's brother, Casey's son, and Crystal's son. So it was Tommy, his son Casey, and Tommy's two grandsons, one being Casey's son and Crystal's son. Casey and his son went out together in their truck, and Tommy and Crystal's son went out together in Tommy's. Casey was towards the front of the land, and Tommy is described as being more towards the back of the land. And Casey said that when they got out there, it was so early that it was still dark. So he was in his truck with his son. He remembers the radio playing while they're kind of all getting situated, and then he hears a gunshot. The next thing he remembers, his cell phone rings, and his nephew is like, "Papa's been shot." So he rushes over to them across the field, and when he arrives, he realizes his father, Tommy, has been shot, and he is beyond saving. Due to Tommy's involvement in Crystal's disappearance and in the investigation that he had been conducting, there were immediate suspicions that somebody did this to stop Tommy. Crystal's family said that it was very well known that within the community, everybody knew when it was start of rifle season, every single year, Tommy took time off work to be on his land to go hunting. And I think until like a couple of years ago, when my stepdad started doing this, I wouldn't have understood like the whole like hunting dynamic, because I'm not a hunter, but he is. And him and my mother have land out east, which he makes like the flight for from the, the west side of the country, and everybody knows like, okay, like this is when we're going, and then goes and hunts on their land. So when you're in like a small community like that, like people just know, everybody knows, and they're like, oh yeah, he's going to be up here, at this time. And I guess it's, it's in the know. It's just what they do. So I would have thought like, okay, well, what are the chances? They're just going to be like, somebody's just going to sit out and wait and just hope that this is the one day that he goes out hunting. And then when I kind of learned about the, the dynamics of hunting season, it made more sense to me. Now, this land was just off of Bluegrass Parkway, where Crystal's vehicle was found. And when police searched the land, they could see that facing towards Bluegrass Parkway, there was this area of brush that had been cut down, and it looked like this viewpoint to the road from the property. But it was still kind of relatively concealed. I don't think if it was like really bright and you were the owner of the land, they would have noticed, but being that it was early in the morning, so still dark, somebody could conceal themselves like in wait and still see like a clear shot of what was going on the land. When Tommy's family sees this, when the Ballard family sees this, they are like, that was not us. Like, this is usually like very concealed and was not opened prior. And this is pretty much confirmed that somebody intentionally made this kind of spying little like gateway passageway, because there was evidence of fresh saw marks on multiple limbs on the trees to open up that viewpoint, which again the family saw or said, we did not do that. Crystal's son is a witness to what happened to his grandfather, but unfortunately, due to just like the conditions and everything happening so suddenly, he wasn't able to like physically witness a person or the person that did this. His account of that morning was that he was standing beside his grandfather and they were walking, into the field. And as they're walking, his grandfather just kind of like puts his hand out to stop him from walking. And he pulls his rifle up to look through the scope, which indicates like, okay, like he's pulling up to look at something that has caught his eye. And as he's doing that action, before he can get a look at whatever he was looking at, which he did not have an opportunity to tell his grandson what it was, he was shot beside his grandson. Like, that in itself, you just have to kind of take that in and think of how brazen that action is on its own. So this is kind of in the area of this whole case where you kind of go to yourself like, okay, what would somebody's motive be to try to stop a father from finding his daughter? And you don't want to go to the conspiracy theories and all of like the intertwining of, we've got to silence this person from figuring out this person, and then all of these other cases intertwined. But when you see the level of investigation that this man did, like, there are a massive box of evidence that he has as to why, if you were the person responsible for Crystal's disappearance, you would have a motive. Tommy turned into a full-blown investigator overnight, and he was a damn good one. The amount of evidence, books with leads and tips, phone records, surveillance footage, you name it. It was just incredible for somebody who, up until the morning that he realized like his daughter had been missing, had no investigative training. He's just a father determined to find his daughter. After Tommy's death, and I think everybody just trying to process what had happened and how to move forward to now solve what happened to him and to find Crystal, it becomes again very clear that there were people in the town that did not want this murder and Crystal's disappearance solved. One of those people was a woman named Crystal Dawn Maupin, who in July 2017, so 2 years after Crystal went missing, was arrested for stealing the missing person awareness signs about Crystal from the town. Now, why would a fellow Crystal do this to Crystal? It possibly could be because she was the new Crystal in Brooke's house life. And again, it just bears the question, what is the motive for doing that? Even if he had just, believed, okay, it's been 2 years, he's moved on, found another lady, would you not want to still find the woman if you had no involvement and clear your name? Why are we ripping off the missing persons flyers and posters? She ended up pleading guilty and received a 60-day suspended sentence with 2-year conditional discharge, meaning she was on probation for 2 years. And if she violated the terms of the probation, then she would serve 60 days in jail, which, as far to my knowledge, she never did. So she didn't violate anything for those 2 years because it is now long past. And even though this situation is, pretty clear who would have wanted Crystal Maupin to do this, it wasn't enough to prove that there was any wrongdoing on Brooks's part. So the years go by, but Crystal's family and friends, they stayed steadfast. They continued to search for her with the same tenacity that Tommy did. And that determination led to the FBI getting involved. And I think that is like what every family member that I've personally spoke to, at least at this point, dreams of, is just like having that outside involvement and presence come in and kind of take charge. And so they ended up conducting 2 searches in Bardstown. The first one happened during August 2020, and the second a year later in August 2021. Now, the FBI have not disclosed what any of those searches found, but on August 27th, 2021, they did announce that they had an item of interest that they had recovered from it was a concrete slab from one of the homes in a subdivision that Brooks Houks, why would we name him anyways, it's just hard to pronounce. Brooks Houks' construction company built houses in the subdivision shortly after Crystal's disappearance. Sorry, got all kerfuffled there with the name tongue-tied. So maybe we'll just recap that since that was a mess. So August 2021, the FBI said that they found an item of interest that was in concrete that was at one of the homes in this subdivision that Brooks's construction company had built houses within right after Crystal's disappearance. Now, after these searches, again, things stalled. There was no movement. But in 2022, the FBI went back. They went to the Houck farm and they were there for 5 days searching. This has also been tight-lipped, obviously, due to the fact that this is an open investigation. But a year later, after 8 years of this investigation, on September 7th, 2023, Nelson County grand jury indicted a man on charges of conspiracy to commit murder and complicity in tampering with physical evidence in Crystal's murder. This man was not Brooks Houks, though. It was a man named Jason Lawson, who was 32 years old. There were a lot of suspicions at this time because in his indictment, Crystal had not been mentioned by name. It said that there was a crime committed in Nelson County on July 3rd and or July 4th, 2015. And in that indictment, it said that he had aided one or more people in planning or commissioning a crime or solicitation to commit the crime when he and or a co-conspirator intentionally caused the death of another person. So from that, it was, suspected this was Crystal, and there was a definite insinuation that there were more arrests coming after Joseph's, and there were. On September 27th, 2023, Crystal's former boyfriend, Brooks Houck, was arraigned in Nelson County on a charge of murder, and he was held on a $10 million bond. Now, on the surface, Joseph does not have direct ties to Brooks or Crystal, but his father, a man named Steve Lawson, he was actually mentioned the first time that when Brooks did that in the police interrogation that Nick called and told him to quit. He was mentioned in that interrogation. And Brooks says, "Oh, yeah, I know Steve. He works for me."
Oh, Steve Lawson.
Okay, who is Steve Lawson?
He's somebody that works for me.
Hey, Steve. Hey, I can't hear you real good. I'm gonna ask you to speak up a little bit, okay?
Okay, sir.
Hey, I was wanting to know. Hey, I've got some things going on next week. I'm
Yes, sir.
gonna need your help with it. Are you already booked up, or can you help me?
I have it
All right. Well, I can write them all down and get them there for you. But I was actually talking about doing some more work with your little skid steer and so forth. Mine's still broke down.
Well, like I said, get with me tomorrow. I'm coming. I know you have a hard time hearing me because it's where I'm located at.
All right.
So just get in touch with me tomorrow and we'll see what we can do. But my question, I just want to tell you, I'm sorry about everything that's going on in your life, brother, and I got you in my prayers.
I said it is a very difficult and trying time, but I appreciate you you saying that. But hey, I need your help while I got you on the phone here. Do you remember the other night you called me really late, and I forgot what you asked me. Can you? I guess we wasn't on the phone. I might have been tired. I know it was pretty late at night. Can you remember what you asked me or what you were after? I can't remember.
Yes, sir, I can. I called to ask you for them numbers for our house.
Oh, for a rental house.
Yes, sir, I did.
And what did I forgot? What did I tell you?
You told me that you would call, what's her name, Katie or whatever, she handles all that.
Crystal.
Crystal, okay, I apologize.
Yeah.
And you said she handles all that, and that you would get back with me on it.
All right. Thank you so much, now.
Hey, if there's anything I can do, you give me a call.
Thank you. You have a good night now.
Yes, sir. God bless you.
Thank you.
So that begs a question in my mind.
All right.
If she's in the truck next to you when he called, why would you need to call her about getting numbers for rental
Because
property?
being that late at night, we're headed to the house. You know, I just wouldn't. She normally's not going to deal with stuff that late. And I mean, I probably didn't even look at the phone to see who it was calling me. I'm sure I just answered it. You know.
But he said you told him that you'd need to call her.
All right.
Why would you need to call her? I mean, that's an odd phrase for someone who's sitting next to you in the truck. Do you understand? You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see exactly what you're saying. But I mean, that's what if that right there is what I told him, that right there is what I told him. We wasn't on the phone that long, but normally I would just, she handles all that, and that's what I would do. She's not going to want to mess with that kind of stuff that late. I'm sure I'll probably try to answer the phone really quickly, so that it wouldn't, a lot of times after I get moving, Eli goes to sleep, you know. Sometimes he goes to sleep in the truck, and sometimes he doesn't. So if you want to call him, you got his number and everything. If you want to call him, you know, you can call him.
This call also, like, I've said it so many times, I could just never be a detective because you can just read my face. I'd be like High School Musical was more profound, you know? The calls are, like, in my opinion, so staged. Like the one with him and Nick, and now this one, it's just like, I feel like if it's, you're wanting to know, you know, like definition of cringe. Right now, all of the Austin McBroom Snapchats that are going on with him trying to act like this is on the same caliber. I think what makes me more mad is for like those 8 years of the investigation, they thought that they were talented enough, like that they did a good enough job with that improv acting that they got away with their alleged crime, allegedly, in my opinion. Finally, on December 8th, Steve Lawson, the connection between everybody, became the third man that was arrested in Crystal's case. His indictment pretty much started the same as his son's, but then went further, saying that he aided one or more people in the planning or commission of death of another, and then destroyed, mutilated, concealed, or removed and altered evidence on July 3rd and or 4th, 2015. Which is when Crystal disappeared. So far, there have just been like those initial hearings. There was one that was already taken place for Steve and Joseph, and in theirs, basically all they asked was that their $500,000 bond be lowered. And I think something that we're going to see in the trial come up is that Joseph was injured in a motorcycle accident in 2021, and he is now wheelchair bound, and that so far is basically being used as like an argument for things. Right now, it was recently used as the reason why he deserves to have his $500,000 bail lowered because, you know, he's not like an easy flight risk. And he's been in the hospital up until like this point with his appearances, appearing remotely and stating that it's been difficult for him to, begin preparing his defense with his attorney. So I'm just this is pure speculation, but thinking that this is going to be a tactic to try and delay trial for him at least. And I just truly hope that the court system just will not let this happen and further drag things out for Crystal's family and Crystal. Joseph has a really, really sketchy past. He has several domestic violence charges against him. Some of the statements made by the women who have been victims of him they're terrifying. He's made threats that not only would he harm them, but all of the people in their lives. He's been accused of putting a gun to a partner's head and telling her that it was going to be her time to die. He's been accused of strangulation as well as unlawful imprisonment. So that's who we're dealing with. As of right now, this is February 2024, and this is actually the month that it's expected to have more movement in the case now that there are finally arrests. If you follow a lot of true crime, though, we know that even after charges and arrests, usually a tactic is delays, and you might not go to trial for a year or longer. But Crystal's family has said, coming up to this point, they are slowly getting a little bit more answers to her case, and they believe that there are still 3 more arrests that are coming. Her family believe that something happened in the barn the night that Crystal disappeared, and they believe that with the other arrests, this is also going to tie in other suspects that were involved in Tommy's death. The prosecutor revealed that investigators had recovered a gun that was sold by Nick Houks, Brooke Houks' brother. He sold this under an assumed name, and it's believed this could match the murder weapon that was used to kill Tommy. I don't know what the scale or what they use to identify these types of things in investigation, but the prosecutor seemed confident enough to bring that up, saying that so far the weapon matches 4 of the 5 criteria that they use to compare in these types of situations. So, I obviously they would know more than me, or maybe if you know what it is, what they would use, to share in the comments below so that we also know. But so far they're saying up at this point in the investigation, they're saying like 4 of the 5 criteria match that, leading them to be confident enough to say something at these court hearings. And it's just cases like this where I want you to remember, because I speak with so many families, and the Elmquists come to mind when I think about something like this, where there's so much like where below the surface, and people who we have evidence that we haven't even shared, where it seems pretty promising, and there are big people involved that sound convinced that things don't add up, and they say that it doesn't add up, but then don't move forward with it. And it makes me feel for Crystal's family and a lot of families in a situation like this, because just money and power is, people think like, oh, it's a conspiracy, you're digging too far. And like how many cases have we gone through where that is exactly what's happening? Look at Ellen Greenberg's case. That's another huge one where it just seems it seems so obvious, so wrong. And yeah, power is powerful. Put that on an inspirational painting. And this family is brazen. The Houks family, they're brazen. The gun angle is not the only thing that they have done. When the FBI had searched Brooks's mother's home years later, when they did their search, they found recordings that were in a jacket in a closet. And these recordings were taken by Brooks's sister, Rhonda, his brother Nick, mother Rosemary, brother-in-law Alex, and Rosemary's live-in boyfriend Larry. They had all secretly brought in recorders and recorded one of the grand jury proceedings when they were subpoenaed to testify shortly after Tommy's murder. And this kind of goes back like, okay, why would they do that? And it's so that everybody's story could be consistent and reaffirms that this family, in my opinion, does this, practices, talks about the story and making sure that everybody's on the same page, which we saw with the embarrassing staged performance phone call in Brooks's interview. Unfortunately, none of them were charged or will be charged because when it was found, it had been too long since it was recorded. These recordings were done in 2015, and so the statute of limitations had passed. You know, had they found it earlier, they would have been charged with contempt of court, which is unfortunate. It's nice and hopeful for the family that at least there, after, all of these years, there is at least some movement. But the biggest upset in all of this is that doesn't solve the fact that Crystal is still missing. And there are people who know what happened and can bring her home to her family and just do the right thing. And I do believe that there are people in this town that are scared. Like I said at the beginning of the video, Crystal and Tommy are not the only disappearance and murder in town. On May 25th, 2013, a officer named Jason Ellis, who was a canine handler with the Bardstown Police Department, was gunned down on his way home from his shift, and his death is extremely suspicious. As he was approaching the exit 34 on, again, the Bluegrass Parkway, it's believed he noticed these branches that were blocking the road. And even though he was off duty and heading home to his wife, he wanted to make sure, this is cleared off the road, everybody is safe. So he got out of his vehicle to move the branches. And as he bent down to move them, he was ambushed and shot several times by somebody who would have been perched like on this cliff above him. And I say ambush because he didn't even have time to pull out a weapon. Like, his weapon was still in his holster. To this day, there are no arrests, no witnesses that have come forward. The FBI is offering reward, Sherrilyn, of up to $50,000 for any information leading to an arrest in Jason's case. And on top of that, there's also a mother and daughter that were murdered in the town with also no apparent motive. Kathy Netherland, who was a special education teacher in Bardstown, and her daughter Samantha Netherland, who was only 16 years old, were brutally murdered in their home on April 22nd, 2014. The only thing that I could find in this case in terms of evidence was that there was surveillance footage near their home that captured a black Impala, but also there have not been any arrests or movement in their case either. There is also a $50,000 reward for any information that leads to an arrest in their case as well. And there's a $100,000 reward being offered for any information in Crystal's disappearance. So if anybody has any information, call Kentucky State Police at 270-766-5078. I believe the FBI is also offering, on top of the $100,000 reward, a $25,000. Did I say 1,000? 100,000. So on top of that, the FBI is also offering a $25,000 reward for information leading to arrest and conviction of people involved or knowledge of what happened to Crystal. In Crystal's case, there's also a website that is set up. You can go to crystalrogerstaskforce.com. You could call the FBI tip line at 1-800-CALL-FBI. And in my opinion, I think that that's like a great resource. I believe that it's one that a lot of families hope for. And that's all I have for right now. So I will keep you updated as things unfold. But like I said, at this point, we're just kind of waiting for trial to even get started, and that you can never really predict how long that's going to take, especially in cases where there is, I hate to say it, but a lot of money involved, which it seems like the Houks definitely have. So I guess I don't even like to make predictions, but going based off what the family has said, it'll be interesting to see who the other 3 people that they believe are that potentially be arrested and involved in this case. And I've got my eyes on Steve and Joseph because they definitely don't have the same resources and power as the Houcks family does. So I'm curious to see if there will be any type of, plea agreement made. We'll see. But I will keep you posted. That is it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already, please consider liking and subscribing. It really does help me so much. I love and I appreciate you. I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly. Until then, make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon.